Hello everybody, welcome to Savage Ink Studios. I'm your host Ink, and today is another Sketchbook Storytime. Before we get into the story, I'm going to let you guys know what I used to make this piece. It was Cezanne gouache, Pigma micron fine liners, and just a scrap piece of cardboard paper. I did give another shot at the gouache, which I'm still not loving, to be honest with you guys. I don't feel like I can get the details that I want with it, which is probably more to do with the paintbrushes that I'm using rather than the gouache itself, but I'm just not loving it. I'm trying, but I'm not loving it. So, with that out of the way, let's get into our story. This story takes place when I was probably 14, about, and as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I had some mental health issues and struggled with some bad coping mechanisms, but I did have one coping skill that was not harmful to myself. It took a really long time for me to get into the habit of writing in a journal every day, but once I got to that point, I found that it really, really helped. And I wrote in my journals every single day, every hard emotion that I was going through. It helped me get it all out in a healthy fashion. I had been in therapy on and off since I was 3. I'm not over exaggerating here. My stepmom, will call her Vanessa, had me in therapy from the time that I was 3 years old. And up until this point, where I was 14, we had not found a good therapist that both of us agreed on, but the therapist that I was seeing at this point in time in the story had tried to express to Vanessa and my dad about how important it was for me to feel like I had a safe place in their home, because we disagreed on so many points of my life. Everything about who I was a battle with this woman. She didn't approve of my sexuality. She didn't approve of my religion. She didn't approve of the way that I presented myself. It was one thing after another. She just did not like the person that I was. And so this therapist had explained to her and my dad that I needed something that was just mine, some form of my life that could not be invaded upon. So there was an agreement made. I would have my journals that they would not go through, and I would have a box that, as long as I wasn't keeping anything dangerous in it, that was the agreement. I could have something for my personal whatever, and they would agree not to go into it, and I would agree not to keep anything dangerous in it. So through this time, I can tell you blood, sweat, and tears went into these books, and it sounds like an over-exaggeration, but I can tell you that it wasn't. I struggled with a lot at that point. Like I said, I was living in a home where I felt that I was not wanted, that I was not loved, with people who were never going to accept me the way that I was. And I wasn't a terrible kid, I wasn't sneaking out and doing drugs and bringing my partners home and being super obvious about it. I wasn't an awful kid. I had a lot of issues. I had a lot of attitude. But I also, went through a lot. And so during this point in time, there was a lot of argument. The first time that I had ended up in the mental hospital, they had gone through this box that my therapist had said, this is your space, and confiscated everything that I had, and I hadn't kept anything dangerous in it. I had kept my word that I would not keep anything dangerous in it. It was, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, because honestly, if you don't like me, that's fine. You don't have to watch my videos, so I'm just gonna say the truth. I had tarot cards, I had sage, religious jewelry, I had cut out pictures of Victoria's Secret magazines because I was really, really pushed down about being attracted to girls. And that was it. It was nothing scary, nothing dangerous. So having my trust broken like that and having my box that my therapist had said, you guys are going to give her this one thing, my journals were the only part of my life that I had left that was mine. It got to a point where Vanessa had not only gone through my journals and decided to read them, but she had also confiscated them from me. So like I said, I started using a journal, trying to really get into it when these mental health things popped up. So I was about 11. This story took place when I was 14. So I had been writing in a journal almost every day from the time that I was 11. So that's 3 years. Between 3 and 4 years. And so there were a lot of them, I just had composition notebooks duct taped together, and this was my whole life, everything that I had to say, everything that I felt. And not only did she read them, she confiscated them and told me it was inappropriate aged reading content. Say it with me now. Inappropriate aged reading content. My journals, which I had written. And, you can bet I blew up at therapy, and I'm just like, do you have any idea what these people did? And even the therapist was like, that's really, really messed up. You guys can't do that. And they're like, well, we're her parents, not you. You don't get to make the rules. And she's like, I don't see what point there is in me trying to work out the issues between you guys if you're not going to listen, because this child is obviously miserable and has no self-identity and has no positive coping skills, and you've just taken away the one thing that she was doing right. So what do you expect to happen at this point? There isn't gonna be you guys meeting in the middle and working it out as a family if you do this. But Vanessa was set in stone on, no, I could not have them. And to this day, I struggle with depression and anxiety, and man, let me tell you, when the occasional bipolar episode kicks in, it's not a pretty thing. And to this day, I don't have any real positive coping skills. It's just kind of, the typical breathe in, breathe out, you're grown up, you just kind of have to do this. And I would have really liked, I've tried in my adult life, I tried again later as a teenager when I was out of that environment to start journaling again, and just because of this thing, because all of those years and years worth of work and time were just taken away from me, I could never bring myself to journal again, which is really unfortunate because, like I said, it was the only positive, healthy coping skill that I had. And here is where the title of our sketchbook story time comes in. The irony and the hypocrisy and the karma. So, years later, after I turned 18 and after that, because I had a really, really bad relationship with my dad and Vanessa up until I turned 18, obviously. And after I turned 18, I didn't speak to them for some time. I think it was actually my dad who ended up reaching out to me later, and I'd more or less gotten over what I'd been through there, and even if it wasn't getting over it, it was more of the fact that there is nothing more that these people can do to me. I'm working, I'm paying my own rent, I live elsewhere, and nothing that they say makes a difference in my life. They can't tell me that I can't love who I love. They can't tell me that I can't identify with the gender that I identify with. They can't tell me any of these things. They can't tell me what religion I have to practice. So, didn't seem to, hurt at all if I were to get back in contact with my dad. And it turns out, despite the awful relationship that we had before I turned 18, after getting out of the house, me and my dad actually got really close because all of this time that I was just angry with him for not defending me or frustrated with the rules that had been set in place, with all of that out of the way, my dad and I kind of realized how much we had in common. We loved all of the same books, we loved all of the same movies, we had a similar sense of humor. And there were days where my dad, this is again years after I turned 18, where he would just show up at my job on his motorcycle and be like, "Hey, let's go for a ride." But during this time after which I turned 18, after I had started talking to the family again, I was never as close with them as I was with, Ivy and my mom's other kids, but, they were back in my life in a way. So this would have taken place maybe 3 years ago, about 3 years ago. So that would have made me like 22. And I get a phone call from my dad. And my and my dad says, "Hey, do you mind if me and my oldest son stay with you for a while?" Crap, why do I keep on coming into this without names for the stories? Sorry. We're just gonna call him my dad's oldest son for now because I don't have a name and I can't seem to come up with one off the top of my head right now. Can we come and stay with you? I was running my rescue at this time, and I was sleeping in my office because I could not afford both my storefront and an apartment. So I seriously just had an air mattress in the office of my rescue that I'd pull out of the closet and use to sleep on. And I'm like, there's not a whole lot of room, but of course, if you guys need a place to stay, what happened? And the irony. The irony, you guys! So apparently one of them had read Vanessa's diary, and because neither one of them would fess up, she was kicking both of them out. Savor that for just a second. That this woman who had confiscated years worth of my diaries, my only positive coping skill, was kicking out her husband and her oldest son, who was probably only like 14, 15 at the time, because one of them read her diary. And I just could not get past that. I remember having a conversation with her at some point after this, and her telling me this story like I should sympathize, and I'm like, "Woman, I have no sympathy for you. Do you remember what you did to me?" I still can't write in a journal because I've lost that ability because of you doing the exact same thing, only worse. And apparently my brother had stepped up and said that he did it just so that they wouldn't get kicked out, but he later told me that he did not in fact do it, and that he doesn't think that my dad did it either. He just didn't want them to have to live in my building with a gazillion snakes. So yeah, that's the irony and the hypocrisy and the karma, and I'm just still mind-boggled that not only did she expect sympathy from me of all people, that, oh boo-hoo, someone read your diary, you not only read my journal, but you confiscated it from me, which therein trashed the only way that I had to process my feelings without, doing something stupid. But really, your son, your husband, I digress. So, that is the story. I hope you liked my sketch. I hope you enjoyed my story. And I will see you guys in the next one.